Hi Islanders, this is Hana, and welcome back to my island. Today, let's talk about a Korean actress named Jae-myung. In my last video about BTS, I said something like this. Where you stand changes what you see. And here's what I've noticed online lately. A lot of Korean people are angry at Jae-myung right now, but a lot of people outside Korea don't get why. Some of them call it Korea's toxic culture or cancel culture. They mock it. Now I talk a lot on this channel about what's broken in Korea. I try to be honest about our problems. But today I want to clear up something a lot of people are getting wrong. First, let me say this. I'm Korean too. I can't stop outside that. Not even if I tried. But I hope this video helps you, especially if you love Korea or care about Korean culture. Shall we begin? A few days ago was August 15th, 2026. That's Korea's Liberation Day, our 81st one. For us, it's a happy day, glorious day. But here is something you might not know. In 1945, Korea broke free from Japanese rule, but it wasn't recognized as an independent country right away. Korea earned that recognition the hard way. So many independence fighters at home and abroad gave their lives for it. The US decided Korea needed outside control for a while first, not full independence right away. Some historians said that was partly about one thing, keeping an eye on the Soviet Union and its growing reach into the Korean peninsula. But Korea's independence activists kept fighting. They helped bring about something called the Cairo Declaration. And because of that, Korea broke free from a defeated Japan for good. So every August 15th, we honor those fighters. We celebrate our freedom. But here's the thing. For as long as I can remember, the morning news always carries another news too. On August 15th, same day, Japanese cabinet ministers visiting a place called Yasukuni Shrine. That's where Japan honors its Class A war criminals, as if they were gods. Sometimes it's the prime minister himself sending an offering there. Even the defense minister still visits every single year. They honor the man responsible for all of that. Imagine the German chancellor visited Hitler and other war criminals' graves every year on the anniversary of Germany's own surrender. Imagine he laid flowers there and praised what Hitler did, as if they were gods. That's roughly what this looks like to us. And it happens every year like clockwork. The Korean grandmothers who survived Japan's wartime sex slavery are gone now. Only 5 are still with us. And yet, the world has always judged this more gently. Nazi crimes in Europe get real scrutiny. Japan's wartime crimes in Asia, barely a headline. But you know what? That doesn't change anything for us. The pain, this resistance, is written into who we are. The world doesn't have to say it for the wound to be real. Jae-myung is a Korean actress. She has become hugely popular lately through a string of hit dramas. A few months ago, she went on a variety show called Fun Strong. It's a cooking show where celebrities share recipes. On the show, she gave a little tour of her family's kitchen. A main fridge, one for meat and seafood, a built-in fridge, one in the bedroom for sauces, and a kimchi fridge. 5 refrigerators all together. She laughed and said something like this. Even when I bring food home, nobody notices. Nobody knows it's there. So it just rots every single day. It was a light, funny moment. A wealthy family, 4 generations of doctors, a pretty actress who never had to worry about a thing. Just an ordinary clip from a variety show. I'm bringing it back up now in a very different context, because that rotting food has come to mean something else entirely. No matter how good it once was, it rots. And rot always gives itself away, sooner or later, with a smell. This whole thing started on another variety show called Problem Child in House. Jae-myung was on it with actor Jung Hae-in. They were there to promote their new Netflix show, Our Sticky Love. And Jae-myung introduced her family again. Her great-grandfather, she said, studied Western medicine in Japan. He opened the very first clinic of its kind in Seoul. He even treated Emperor Gojong, Korea's last emperor. Her grandfather, her father, and her old sisters are all doctors too. 4 generations of doctors, she said, a real medical dynasty. You could hear the pride in her voice. Then people found out her great-grandfather's name, An Sang-ho. You need to remember this name. And the whole story took a sharp turn. First of all, that Western medical training he was so proud of, it was paid for with the Korean money. Back in 1896, An Sang-ho won a scholarship from the Joseon government. That's what Korea was called back then, before it became the Korean Empire in 1897. He was sent to Tokyo to study. It was an investment. Korea wanted to raise a new generation of modern doctors. But around 1904, the government called him home. They wanted him to teach at a medical school, and he just didn't answer. He stayed in Tokyo for years longer instead. Think about that for a second. His country paid for his education, and the moment his country needed him back, he turned his back on it. There was another student on that same scholarship. His name was Kim Il-nam. He later joined the independence movement fighting against Japan. Same country, same money, same era, same education, and 2 completely different lives. Once Jae-myung's proud family story went public, people started digging. Because here's the hard truth about Korea. If a family kept its wealth from that era all the way to today, there's usually one reason why. In 1918, a newspaper called 매일신보 interviewed An Sang-ho. The paper was the mouthpiece of Japan's colonial government. And here's what he told them. I'm the same as a Japanese person. I don't own a single piece of Korean clothing anymore. I can't handle spicy food at all. I hardly ever mix with the Korean people. So nothing about my life feels inconvenient. The thinker Franz Fanon wrote about people like this. Colonized elites who fully absorb their colonizers' language and lifestyle, trying to become one with the people ruling over them. That line, I'm the same as a Japanese person, reads almost like a confession. His wife, a Japanese woman named Isoko, lived in Korea for 11 years. She calmly said she couldn't speak a single word of Korean. Someone once asked her if her kids play with the Korean children in the neighborhood. There's a tram line right in front of our house, so we don't let the children go out. Our family basically lives in a different world. A whole different world, built out of a single tram line. That image brought another world to my mind. There's an Oscar-winning film called The Zone of Interest. It follows the family of the man who ran Auschwitz, tending their garden right next to the camp wall. The screams on the other side only ever reach us as sound. That family's wall and the An family's tram line mean the exact same thing. Both of them cut off contact with something unbearable until it feels like that reality belongs somewhere else entirely. So when An Sang-ho said nothing feels inconvenient, that wasn't really about adjusting well. He would erase the feeling of discomfort itself. If the story had stopped there, it would have just been a strange moment from another era. But here's the thing about a fridge full of rotten food. Once you open that door, it doesn't close easily again. As the controversy grew, researchers dug up something else. In 1909, a young independence activist named Lee Jae-myung stabbed a man called Lee Wan-yong. Lee Wan-yong was a collaborator. He had handed Korea over to Japan. And An Sang-ho, Ha-young's great-grandfather, was one of the doctors who saved his life. Then there's the heaviest rumor of all. In 1919, Emperor Gojong died suddenly, and the story spread wide and fast among the Korean public. The story was this. An Sang-ho, his personal doctor, poisoned him on orders from the Japanese government. This rumor even showed up in two memoirs, one by a royal family member named Lee Bang-ja, one by a Japanese palace official named Gondo Shirosuke. Nobody's ever confirmed if it's true. But think about it. A rumor like that attached to the last emperor's own doctor? That tells you how close this family stood to Japan's power. The press and the public kept following the 4 generations of doctors' story. Ha-young herself had told it over and over. And every layer they pulled back revealed something new. After the great-grandfather, they turned to grandfather. People found out he had worked at a place called Sorokdo National Hospital. His name was An Bu-ho. Ha-young's agency responded to the questions with this line. An Bu-ho, they said, devoted himself to helping patients with Hansen's disease. That's what leprosy used to be called. But that explanation opened up another door. Because Sorokdo, starting the very year An Bu-ho arrived in 1949, was a place of real horror. Around 1,191 patients there were forced to have surgery, so they couldn't have children. Doctors ran bone marrow tests without consent. It was just one item on a long, dark list. An Bu-ho graduated from Gyeongsang Medical College. He is on record as the first person in Korea to hold a medical doctorate. He studied Hansen's disease at Sorokdo from around 1949 to 1953. And he stayed at Sorokdo right through the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Every man between 15 and 60 was subject to the draft back then. So why did he end up at Sorokdo? Of all places, right when the draft was in full force. Nobody's confirmed this. It's just a question someone raised. And his son, Ha-young's father, is Dr. An Byung-mun. He was actually born on Sorokdo in 1951, right in the middle of his father's time there. Back then, doctors on Sorokdo used a brutal method. They would stick a needle into a patient's chest to pull bone marrow and test for the disease. Only couples who would agree to that surgery were allowed to live together. If a woman got pregnant, the pregnancy was often forced to end. Sometimes babies were simply taken from their parents. Parents and children could only speak once a month, and even then across a dividing line. So infection couldn't pass between them. That line still exists today. There's a sign at the entrance to Sorokdo. It reads, "The Wailing Platform." Now, there is no direct proof that An Bu-ho took part in any of this himself. But that one word, devoted, ended up doing something else. It reminded everyone what that hospital's name actually stands for. As the controversy grew, Ha-young went quiet. Public anger just kept building. Then someone else stepped forward. Not Ha-young, her father. He gave an interview to explain. He said his own father, An Bu-ho, had once served Crown Prince Eui-jin, a man known for resisting Japan. But here's the problem. The book he cited was called The Pioneers of Korean Medicine. Its author, Chung is himself listed in Korea's official registry of collaborators. And his older brother has served on the same council as An Sang-ho, Ha-young's great-grandfather. So her father reached out to explain the family name. But it ended up proving something else entirely. Just how tightly this whole network was woven together. And there's more. When he described Japan taking over Korea, he used a specific phrase. After the union of Korea and Japan. Korea's own Ministry of Patriot and Veterans Affairs has a clear position on this. Words like union or merger were Japan's own language. Language built to make a hostile takeover sound legitimate. Korea's sovereignty was taken by force. Calling it a union makes it sound like two countries simply agreed to become one. It's a word that centers the side that caused the harm, not the side that lost everything. That phrase just wasn't a slip of the tongue. It's a window into how this family has remembered that era all along. There's a psychologist named Stanley Cohen. He described 3 ways people deal with the hard truth. Literal denial. That's saying it never happened at all. Interpretive denial. That's admitting the facts, but renaming them, changing what they mean. Implicatory denial. That's admitting the facts, but quietly shrinking how much responsibility they carry. When this scandal first broke, Ha-young's agency called it groundless. That's literal denial, as if none of it ever happened. Then they admitted the grandfather worked at Sorokdo National Hospital, but they said his role in the abuses was unconfirmed, and they praised his devotion to medicine. That's implicatory denial. Admit the facts, quietly lightening the weight. Her father's phrase, the union of Korea and Japan, that's interpretive denial. An event where a country was taken by force got a whole new name. And that new name changed what the event actually was. Later, reporting filled in a clearer picture. A research group called the Center for Historical Truth and Justice dug even deeper. They found An Sang-ho's collaboration went back even further to 1909. A man named An Jung-gun shot and killed a Japanese officer named Ito Hirobumi. After that, a memorial committee formed in Seoul to honor Ito Hirobumi, and An Sang-ho's name was on it. Later, he served on an advisory council for Japan's colonial government in Seoul. He was also active in a group built especially to interfere with the independence movement. Historians now agree. This was active collaboration, not just going along to get along. And all of this broke just 1 week before Liberation Day. It was an unbelievable coincidence, if you even want to call it that. But honestly, I don't want to call it just a coincidence. Things that were never properly dealt with tend to resurface. Every August in Korean society, it's an old wound, one this country still hasn't worked through. Most families who built wealth by collaborating with Japan chose one of 2 paths afterward: stay quiet or move abroad. Deep down, they knew they couldn't stand behind where that money came from. But Ha-young chose something different. She chose to become an actress, a career built entirely on public affection. Nobody forced that choice on her. But here's what's clear. She turned her 4 generations of doctors' story into part of her public image, an asset. Over her career, in interview after interview, she brought up her family more than 80 times. Instead of letting her work speak for itself, she leaned on something else, the image of a smart, cultured actress from a distinguished family. And it didn't stop there. The family didn't just inherit wealth. They pushed an image of themselves as something bigger, benefactors to the nation, people who treated an emperor, served a prince, devoted themselves to the sick. They were trying to raise themselves up with a story about a family that did good for this country. And that story collapsed just days before Liberation Day. Her father's explanation only made things worse. A few more days passed. Then on August 12th, Jae-myung posted a handwritten apology online. She admitted she had only ever known fragments of her great-grandfather's life, just what her family told her. She admitted she had brought him up proudly in interview after interview without really understanding the full picture. And she admitted her agency's first response, calling it all groundless, has been wrong. Even so, the anger didn't ease up. Here's the thing. This was never really about whether her apology was sincere. It came after rounds and rounds of denial. And by then, it was already too late. She was standing in front of a grave, one she'd already dug herself. This isn't a story about the public digging into her family out of spite. She is the one who opened that door first. She opened the lid herself and said, look at this. Look how impressive my family is. But when that lid came open, what came out wasn't what she expected at all. Koreans often say our lives feels like episodes of a K-drama. But the person who wrote this script, staged it, and pulled back the curtain herself was Jae-myung. So picture a French actress proudly telling a talk show she'd from 4 generations of scientists. And it turns out her great-grandfather helped build the weapons for Nazi Germany. Would that career survive? More than 80 years after liberation, and Japan still does this. Officials still visit a shrine every year, honoring war criminals as gods, still calling their crimes achievements. Against that backdrop, Jae-myung's story woke Korean people back up to all of it. Now, Korean people aren't arguing for guilt by blood here. Jae-myung didn't choose her era or her bloodline. Being a descendant isn't by itself a crime. But a career built on public trust comes with a basic responsibility. If you're going to treat that trust as an asset, you have to answer for where the asset came from. She broke that responsibility directly. If anything, she tried to use wealth built through collaboration to boost her own career. The sociologist Pierre Bourdieu had a word for this. When inherited privilege starts to look like personal achievement, he called it misrecognition. Every time the 4 generations of doctor's story got repeated, privilege that was never accounted for got rewritten as pure hard work. Years later, actress Lee Jae-myung went through something similar. More than a decade of shame and silence over her own grandfather's collaboration. There's also the case of actor Kang Dong-won. Jae-myung isn't the first. So how many more unopened refrigerators are still out there in this country? Japanese media didn't let this story pass by either. A guest commentator for Fuji TV, a professor named Kamoshika Hiromi, wrote a column arguing that Korea's habit of holding descendants accountable for their ancestors is troubling. Honestly, it's a strange sin. The side that caused the harm, telling the side that suffered it to stop digging, to just move on already. Let's go back to 1946 in Nuremberg. Nazi doctors stood trial there for human experimentation. It was an international trial run by the Allied powers. But near Harbin in Japanese-occupied Manchuria, something very different happened. A group called Unit 731 ran its own human experience there. And after the war, most of them never faced trial at all. The US gave them criminal immunity in exchange for their research data. Japan's own political world dodged this kind of reckoning too. A man named Kishi Nobusuke was arrested as a suspected war criminal, released without ever being charged. He later became Japan's prime minister. Decades later, his own grandson Abe Shinzo became prime minister too. Abe Shinzo said openly that his grandfather was his role model. Historians have pointed this out for years. The world still treats Nazi crimes with real seriousness. But Japan's wartime crimes in Asia from that exact same period, a much duller standard, a far more forgiving one. The West was sensitive to killing on its own battlefields in Europe, and a lot less sensitive to killing on battlefields in Asia. That imbalance still hasn't been fixed, even now. And post-war, Japan has been one of the most active forces taking advantage of it. After the Cold War ended, conservative politicians and intellectuals built an organized movement, historical revisionism. It started with individual remarks, then media and magazines, then school textbooks. And real money backs this too. A Harvard law professor named Mark Ramsire holds a chair funded by Mitsubishi, close to $1 million. In 2020, he published a paper claiming Korea's comfort to women, the women Japan forced into wartime sexual slavery, were never victims at all, just willing prostitutes for money. Historians tore the paper apart. So did Harvard's own students. But Japan's government gave him one of its highest honors away, the Order of the Rising Sun. I'm not going to explain what that symbol means, not anymore. It's the same as a Nazi swastika. Out of that same movement grows something called colonial modernization theory, the idea that Korea only developed because by Japanese rule. Korea's own New Right movement isn't disconnected from that same current. That's a political movement here that argues Japanese rule wasn't really so bad. It sounds strikingly close to what An Sang-ho said 100 years ago. The one line, "I'm the same as a Japanese person," put on the disguise of an academic footnote, and is still walking around Korean society today. And look, this isn't just a Japan problem. Any society that fails to deal with its own past will see that failure come back, wearing a different face. In Korea, because collaboration 100 years ago was never fully dealt with, something else happens. Even the Gwangju massacre 46 years ago still gets denied. Even the Jeju massacre 78 years ago still gets denied. Banners have gone up in Korea calling Gwangju a riot. Someone even used AI to fake old newspaper front pages. And both of these events already have official government reports. One piece of unresolved history doesn't just sit still. It moves around. And it keeps generating new kinds of denial. If we don't pull that root out completely, 100 years from now, we will probably be standing in front of somebody else's rotten fridge. So look, Japan, a country that caused this kind of harm doesn't get to turn around and say, "Enough already, stop digging." Not to the country it hurts. Forgiveness only makes sense after an apology and real accountability. Recording what happened and remembering it is still this society's job to carry. In 1948, Korea's brand new National Assembly created something, a special committee to investigate collaborators with the Japanese role. Now compare that to Europe after the war. France put more than 120,000 people on trial for collaborating with the Nazis. Almost 800 of them were executed. The Netherlands investigated 200,000 people. Nearly 100,000 went to prison. Belgium handed down thousands of death sentences too. None of it was perfect. Historians still argue about the details even now. But it happened. It was real, on a massive scale. Korea tried to do the same thing like that too. Its job was simple: investigate them, punish them. But the roots of what blocked that work go back even earlier, to the period of American military rule before Korea even had a government. In 1945, the US military occupied southern Korea, and for the sake of convenience, they kept most of the old system in place. The same officials, the same government machine, straight from Japan's colonial rule. The American military needed reliable allies against the communist forces. And the police and officials who'd obediently served Japan, they were easy to work with too. So the police, the military, and the government machine propping up President Lee Jae-myung, already largely run by people who'd collaborated with Japan. In June 1949, a crowd organized by a former pro-Japanese police officer tried to storm the committee's offices. Think about it. A body the state itself created, pushed to the edge of gunfire by collaborators still inside that state. Around the same time, National Assembly members who supported the committee got arrested, one after another, accused of secretly working with North Korea. By 1949, the special committee was shut down for good. It had investigated 682 cases, but only about 10 people ever received prison sentences. And most of those were released again by the following spring. Korean historians have pointed this out for years. That committee's failure wasn't just one isolated setback. It became the starting point for decades of dictatorship, state violence, and elite network that still exists today. History gets written by whoever wins. The same police and military figures who tore down their committee, they stayed exactly where they were, carrying out state violence under Lee Jae-myung and later under military rule. The Jeju Massacre of 1948, the Gwangju Massacre of 1980, both still get denied today. Maybe that denial has roots in the very same place. Power that was never held accountable, quietly writing its own version of history. In 2015, a Korean outlet called Newstapa found 1,177 identified descendants of Japanese collaborators. The biggest group, 32%, worked as corporate executives. Right behind them, 191 professors and 147 doctors. The collaborators who openly took titles and land from Japan, at least history remembered their name. But professors, doctors whose collaboration became a quiet asset, degrees, hospitals, practices, never even clearly marked as something Korea needed to reckon with. That asset just kept passing down, generation after generation, fully intact. Some people ask why Jae-myung should carry her ancestors' crimes. She never collaborated with anyone herself, after all. Japanese media made the same argument, and some voices abroad call this Korea's toxic culture or cancer culture. Burying one person overnight, they said. A lot of foreign fans said something similar too. Why hold her responsible for what her ancestors did? That's basically guilt by association. Here's the thing though. Europe doesn't really have this problem. Not the same way. Right after the war, they hunted down Nazi collaborators first hard. And they never really stopped. Even now, in the 2020s, German courts still put former camp guards on trial. People now in their 90s or even older than 100. So there's far less old buried wells just sitting there quietly waiting to surface generations later. Korea never got that chance. That special committee got shut down before it could finish the job. So of course this feels different now. 100 years later, coming out all at once. But that's not proof this shouldn't matter. It's proof of exactly the opposite. This is what happens when a reckoning gets delayed. Not skipped, delayed. Also, I want to ask something back. Then why do we honor the descendants of independence fighters? They are also just the descendants. Why do we still ask Japan for an apology? That's also just something past generations did. There's an old Korean saying, fighter for independence and 3 generations of your family will suffer. Collaborate with Japan and 3 generations of your family will prosper. Jae-myung's story just proved all over again that this saying still isn't wrong. There's really only one answer here. A past that's never dealt with gets passed down. And the guilt that comes with it gets passed down too. We've never forgiven the people who betrayed this nation, and they've never once properly apologized either. Try to imagine this for a second. Your own parents and siblings tortured and executed. And because of that, the family next door lives comfortably for generations. Or imagine this. Someone reports their own neighbors to the colonial authorities. That report gets the neighbor's whole family wiped out. And the land and money from that betrayer turns 100 years later into today's medical degrees, today's hospitals, today's good name. An Sang-ho used that same money, those same connections, to save a man's life. A man was Lee Jae-myeong. He would handed Korea over to Japan. The group An Sang-ho belonged to included Lee Jae-myeong himself. And he never once seemed ashamed of any of it. I'm the same as a Japanese person, he said, in print, with his name and his face right there. If the idea of guilt passing down feels unfair to you, here's a simple answer. Give the wealth back to independence activists and their descendants. But do you really think the descendants of national traitors would ever do that? Of course not. Most of them grew up genuinely believing that wealth was just an honest paycheck. Now, let's look at the other side of this story too. There were children whose parents were executed for fighting for independence. Children who never even found out where the bodies were buried. Their homes got seized. Their land got seized. They fled into the mountains, hungry, and survived on wild plants. They grew up carrying a label, a child with no parents. And here's the cruel part. After liberation, it was often these same families who got branded as communist by the very pro-Japanese networks that had managed to hold on to power. Denied an education, denied jobs, forced into poverty and humiliation, all because of who their parents were. We get to eat 3 meals a day in comfort because of people like them. Some of them left Korea to fight abroad and died there, never once seeing liberation with their own eyes. Still, 30 of those fighters never got to set foot in their own country again. This year, making the 81st anniversary of liberation, Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a food company called 빙그레 made them honorary passports. You probably know 빙그레 already. They are the banana people. That little yellow bottle you might have seen at a Korean convenience store, that's them. Years ago, while I was living abroad, I met a friend. She'd fled a military coup in Myanmar into Thailand, living there without a passport at all. Looking at her face, I felt something for the first time. The actual weight of the passport I would always carry it around without a second thought. According to the UN's Refugee Agency, as of the end of 2025, at least 4.5 million people in the world are stateless. Having a nationality being protected by a country isn't something anyone should take for granted. The first page of Korean passport carries a message. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea requests all whom it may concern to permit the bearer, a national of the Republic of Korea, to pass freely without delay or hindrance, and to provide every possible assistance and protection in case of need. This single sentence exists today for one reason. Countless independence activists risked their lives, so there would be a country left to write it. An ancestor's wrongdoing isn't a descendant's crime, and an ancestor's good deeds aren't a descendant's achievement either. But here's the catch. If you try to borrow your ancestor's light to make your own face shine brighter, there's a cost. You have to carry whatever shadow that light casts too. You can't claim your ancestors only when it's something to brag about, and disown them the moment it's something you'd have to answer for. What Jae-myung ended up carrying after trying to shine brighter with her family's name was exactly that shadow. Honestly, I don't know what happens to Jae-myung from here. She stayed silent for a while, hiding behind her father. That only made things worse. Then she finally put out her own apology. But more keeps coming out even now. Right now, Jae-myung has a few projects in producing or lined up. But here's the thing. She's the one who dug up this old pain. If you make your living off public affection, that comes with a responsibility. She owes the public real reflection, real soul searching. Honestly, the K-drama industry doesn't really care about Korean viewers anymore. The real money comes from overseas now. So the industry might just close ranks around her and keep her career going. Some people in Korea believe you should separate the artist from the work. Others don't. But there are still descendants of the independence fighters living in poverty. Right now, today. So no, this isn't something you can settle with a simple answer. In December 1909, a 23-year-old man named Lee Jae-myung did something bold. Remember his name. He swung a dagger at Lee Jae-myung right outside Myeongdong Cathedral. Like I mentioned earlier, Lee Jae-myung was the man who'd handed Korea over to Japan. There's still a small marker at the cathedral entrance today, marking that exact spot. Lee Jae-myung collapsed, badly wounded in the shoulder, and some of the era's top doctors saved his life. Jae-myung's great-grandfather, An Sang-ho, was one of them. What a destiny. The next year, on September 30th, 1910, Lee Jae-myung was executed by hanging at a prison that's now the Seodaemun Prison History Hall. It happened one day before Japan's colonial government formally took power. He was 24 years old. Before he died, he said something like this: "When I die, I will be reborn as hundreds of thousands of Lee Jae-myung, and I will make sure Japan falls." Lee Jae-myung lived another 17 years after that, suffering from his wounds the whole time. 117 years passed. In 2026, a president who happens to share that exact name, Lee Jae-myung, signed a law to recover wealth built through collaboration with Japan. The law says Korea will investigate this wealth and reclaim it and hold people accountable. Faced with the same name, Lee Jae-myung, showing up again after 117 years, I can't call it just a coincidence. A blade that failed 117 years ago has come back today, written into the language of a law. Even history written by the winners has its exceptions. The people of this country have kept rewriting that history again and again. The uprising in 1960 did it. Gwangju in 1980 did it. The 2016 candlelight protest did it. The 2024 K-pop lightstick protest did it too. At every point where these Japanese collaborators networks tried to raise the record, ordinary people kept quietly digging it back up. We didn't just accept the history the winners wrote. We kept writing our own version over and over until it stuck. And Exhuma captured our unresolved history of collaboration in a single line. Wealth with no roots, no explanation. In the film, actor Choi Min-sik plays Sang-deok. He's a geomancer, someone who reads the energy of the land and old graves. Did you know that money can rot too? In the film Exhuma, what Sang-deok smelled coming off that wealthy family wasn't good food. It was the smell of rotten money. And what came out of Hayoung's refrigerator? The exact same smell. The smell that things give off when they're left alone too long. The kind you just can't hide. There's no fridge in the world that keeps food from rotting forever. Eventually, the smell finds its way out, and the door always opens. A past that's never been dealt with will keep coming back, reborn as hundreds of thousands of Lee Jae-myung, until it's finally held accountable. So what did you think? I'd love to hear from you too. If this video meant something to you, give it a like and hit subscribe. This has been Hana's Island. You're safe here now. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay easy on your own island.